The forest before dawn had its own quiet rhythm, a kind of slow, breathing life that wrapped itself around everything in its path. A thin mist drifted between the tall sal trees, curling around their trunks like pale smoke. Dew clung to every leaf, ready to slip into the soil at the slightest touch, and the sleeping village behind the hills was still wrapped in the soft hush of early morning dreams. But one girl was already awake, stepping barefoot along the forest trail as she did every day. 14-year-old Mira balanced a woven basket against her hip, filled with the herbs and wildflowers she gathered for her grandmother. The earth was cool beneath her feet, and she inhaled the sweet, damp smell of the morning. The forest was familiar to her, almost like a friend she had grown up alongside, whispering tales to her in rustling leaves and bird calls. She felt safe here, protected. Even when the trees groaned and shadows stretched, she never felt alone. But that morning something felt different. There was a strange heaviness in the air, an electric tension that prickled across her skin. She couldn't explain it, but the forest felt awake in a way it usually didn't. Watchful, as if holding its breath. Mira slowed her pace, scanning the clusters of thick undergrowth around her. The sun had barely begun its climb, and the sky remained a soft gray-blue, casting long shadows between the trees. She could hear her own breath, steady but thoughtful, and the distant murmur of a stream trickling over smooth stones. Everything else remained still. And then she heard it, a sound so sharp, so unexpected, that the basket slipped slightly from her hands. It was a cry, but not the cry of a bird or the bark of a deer. This was deep, trembling, aching with pain, a sound that struck her heart like a startled beat. Mira froze, her pulse racing in her throat. The cry came again, longer this time, almost pleading. Instinct urged her to turn back toward the village, to run home and tell the elders that something was wrong in the forest. But her feet refused to move. She stood planted in place, listening. The sound was too desperate, too frightened. Whatever creature was calling out didn't just need help. It needed help now. Her grandmother always said Mira had a heart too soft for her own good. But Mira didn't see it that way. She believed a heart was only as good as what you used it for. So she took a breath, then another, and she stepped toward the sound. The forest path narrowed, forcing her to push past hanging vines and ferns brushing against her legs. Each time the cry echoed, rusty and strained, she followed it like a beacon. Her steps quickened, though fear flickered inside her like a trembling flame. She whispered to herself under her breath, steadying the pounding in her chest. Whatever it is, hold on. I'm coming. As she moved deeper into the forest, the trees grew thicker. The canopy above wove itself into a dense, interlocking maze of leaves that dimmed the morning light. But Mira didn't hesitate. Something inside her told her she didn't have a choice. A few minutes later, she reached a place she had never seen before. A clearing, large, messy, with the earth dug up in jagged patches as though something massive had thrashed about recently. Broken branches hung from nearby trees, and the air smelled strangely metallic. Mira stepped closer, her heart now hammering so loud she could feel it behind her eyes. And then she saw it. The breath left her body in a single, stunned exhale. A young elephant, no more than 3 or 4 years old, lay half-collapsed near the center of the clearing, its leg twisted unnaturally inside a thick steel trap buried deep in the mud. The chain attached to the trap was bolted into the roots of a fallen tree, preventing the elephant from moving more than a foot in any direction. Its sides heaved with pain, and its small trunk curled in frantic motions, brushing against the wound where the jagged metal dug into its skin. Blood pooled beneath its leg, dark and sticky, mixing with the mud. Mira clapped a hand over her mouth. Her knees felt weak. She had heard stories about poachers' traps, brutal devices hidden under leaves or mud, designed to maim. She knew villagers had warned children not to wander too far, because poachers roamed the outskirts of the forest, setting snares to catch anything valuable they could sell. But she had never seen one, and she had never imagined this. The elephant lifted its head, eyes glassy with pain, and let out a cry that vibrated straight into her soul. Mira felt tears prick at her eyes. Oh no! "Oh no, little one." She moved slowly, carefully, not wanting to startle it. Every step she took made the elephant's ears flutter nervously, but it didn't try to move away. Couldn't. When she was close enough to see the deep cuts around its leg clearly, she winced. The trap wasn't new. It had been there for hours, maybe longer. If she didn't help, the elephant would die. And she knew it. Her breath came fast, uneven. "Okay, think. You have to think." She looked around for tools, for villagers, for signs anyone else had heard the cries. But she was alone, completely alone. And the elephant let out another cry, so full of terror and exhaustion that Mira felt something inside her break. She knelt in the mud beside its trapped leg. "I'm going to help you," she whispered. "But you have to stay calm. Please, please stay calm." Her hands trembled as she reached toward the trap. The metal was thick, far thicker than anything she could break with her bare hands. She searched the area and found a fallen branch heavy enough to use as leverage. It wasn't ideal, but it was the only tool she had. She wedged the branch into the hinge of the trap and pushed with all her strength. Muscles in her arms and back screamed as she forced her weight onto it. The trap resisted, metal scraping loudly against metal. The elephant trumpeted in fear and pain, its trunk gripping the ground. "It's okay," Mira gasped, voice shaking. "Stay with me." She pushed again, harder this time. The trap shifted, but only slightly. Mira's arms burned, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. Sweat mixed with dirt on her forehead. Her breath came out in ragged bursts. She pushed and pushed until the wood cracked beneath her hands. Snap! The branch split into two useless pieces. Mira stared at them, heart dropping. The elephant looked at her with wide, shimmering eyes. It whimpered softly, as if asking her not to give up. She swallowed, tears threatening again. "I won't leave you, I promise." She grabbed a rock, jamming it into the trap's hinge. She hit it again and again. Sparks flew. Metal groaned. Her hands blistered. Her fingers bled. The elephant flinched and cried, but Mira didn't stop. She worked until her vision blurred and her arms shook uncontrollably. Finally, something gave way. The hinge loosened. Mira sucked in a breath, wiped her face with a muddy arm, and pried again with all her remaining strength. The trap opened halfway, enough for the elephant to pull its leg free. "Come on," she urged. The elephant lifted its leg, trembling violently, and slid it out of the jagged metal. Mira backed away quickly as the elephant collapsed to the ground, exhausted, trunk flopping weakly beside its face. Blood seeped from the wound, and Mira tore part of her shawl to wrap it, trying to slow the bleeding. "You're okay? You're okay now." But then she heard something that froze her blood. A deep rumble, low, powerful, coming from behind her. Mira's heart stopped. She turned slowly. There, emerging from the trees like spirits of the earth, stood a massive herd of elephants. At least 12 adults. Ears flared, trunks raised, eyes fixed on her. And at the front was the matriarch, a towering elephant with torn ears and ancient, intelligent eyes that glowed with fierce protectiveness. Mira's legs nearly gave out. She had been so focused on the trapped young one that she hadn't realized who might come looking for him. The herd fanned out, forming a semicircle around her and the injured calf. The ground trembled with their weight. Mira's voice cracked with fear. I was helping. Please." The matriarch let out a thunderous roar, a warning that shook the leaves from nearby branches. Mira lifted her hands slowly, palms open. "Please don't hurt me. I didn't mean any harm. I was just trying to save him." The elephants stepped closer. Mira backed up until her foot hit a root. She stumbled, landing hard on the ground. The matriarch loomed over her, trunk curling. Mira squeezed her eyes shut, whispering, "Please." Something warm brushed her cheek. Not forcefully, not in anger, gently. Her eyes flew open. The matriarch was touching her face with the tip of her trunk. Soft, deliberate, almost tender. Mira blinked in disbelief. Another elephant approached, smaller, younger, and sniffed the torn piece of shawl she'd tied around the calf's wound. Then it looked at her, ears relaxing. The herd murmured in low rumbles, communicating among themselves. Then the calf, weak but alive, lifted its trunk and reached toward Mira. She gasped softly. The elephant stepped back, creating space for the calf to stand. The matriarch nudged him gently, encouraging him. Mira watched as he wobbled, then leaned against her mother. The herd surrounded the calf protectively. Then something unbelievable happened. The matriarch turned to Mira and dipped her massive head. A gesture of gratitude. Mira's breath caught. Before she could understand what was happening, another elephant approached and brushed its trunk against her shoulder. And another. And another. One by one, the herd acknowledged her, not as a threat but as a protector. Mira pressed a hand to her chest, overwhelmed. "You're welcome," she whispered. The herd began to move, slow and steady, guiding the calf between them. But the calf paused. He turned back and walked to Mira. He leaned his head gently against her chest. Mira's eyes filled with tears. She wrapped her arms around his trunk. Holding him for a moment she knew she would never forget. The matriarch let out a soft rumble, calling him back. He hesitated, then turned and followed his family into the forest. Mira watched until the last elephant disappeared behind the trees. Her breath trembled as she finally let herself sit down in the mud, overwhelmed and shaking. She had risked her life, but she had saved one. And in return, she had been given a moment of pure, wordless gratitude. Something the world rarely saw, something she would remember for the rest of her life. Later that evening, when villagers discovered her exhausted, muddy, and injured on the forest path, they feared the worst. But Mira could only smile through her tears. "They weren't angry," she said softly. They thanked me." Word spread rapidly over the village, over the region, over the country. Wildlife experts, conservationists, and animal lovers everywhere were stunned. Stories were exchanged. Footage from villagers who later found the calf healed and playful circulated online. And people said the same thing. That girl saved an elephant. But Mira knew the truth. The elephant had saved her, too. Because in that moment, standing between fear and bravery, between danger and compassion, she discovered the deepest truth of all. Sometimes courage isn't loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's just choosing to help, even when you're afraid. And sometimes, even elephants say thank you.